there isn't anything really sacred about going over this order. The concepts kind of overlap a little bit. How we are, how we think, and how we are pretty closely related. The last four of those sort of focus down probably a little bit closer on what we think we know and how we think we know it, and how it's changed, how those things have changed, what we know and how we know it, especially about ourselves and about our world, how those have been changed by especially digital computational technologies. And you can't look at this in isolation from the rest of the technologies in the world. There's other stuff too, and we'll see some of that. But we're principally interested in what new media is bringing to the table. And as you know from reading the book and stuff we've already talked about, you can't altogether separate that from what mass media did. So it's sort of like the effects of mass media plus what might be going on now, and that's troublesome, because we worried about some of this stuff with regard to mass media. It's not like it just started when new media started. It's sort of an exacerbation of the mass media effects. And I think probably more than anything else, even though identity is really important, and these concerns over the implications of virtual worlds or online environments, social environments which allow anonymity or trying on different roles, all the concerns we have in those areas are valid, but this is probably the one that most concerns educators. Whether or not it concerns the general public or not is a different question. But this is the one that most concerns educators, and that comes back to essentially reading and thinking in language and reasoning and making sense out of the world. And circulates around these issues of whether or not it's very similar to taking out the newspaper industry and not really replacing it with anything, although we haven't altogether done that. There's lots of movement in the direction of trying to find new ways of doing journalism, but the concern is you take out the record industry and you don't really replace it with anything. You take out the newspaper industry and don't really replace it with anything. And in this case, you take out careful, linear, sequential, serial, analog thinking, and then replace it with image-based thought, as though you could just flip that switch, and humans can all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, 150 years, less than 150 years altogether, go from thinking in language and reasoning in language and working out what's true and what's not true and what's right and what's wrong using language, and then all of a sudden, just because the media has changed, don't need to do that as much and can replace it with something else. And the something else is quick informational accessing and processing, like a computer. I mean, we always talk about, humans being better than computers and computers not, but yet you stop and think about it, and quick access and process really isn't something that we do near as well as machines. It is the way they work. Faster the better. Right? And because of the algorithmic way that they work, and there aren't human factors in there, the mistakes they make are different than the kinds of mistakes that we make when we process and access quickly. And we can do that. The thing inside here is enormously complex and poorly understood. And it's known that we don't use very much of it. So on the upside here, maybe what we're doing is learning to use more of it in a different kind of way, which might be, in the long run, really, really cool. We just don't know yet. But in the short term, anyway, what we're pretty sure of is that quick access and processes we're not very good at. While the machines might be, we're not very good at it. We need to think through it, usually with language, and often in a sequential, I'm not going to repeat all those, but in an analog way, in order to make sense out of it. in order to figure out what it means, in order to figure out what we should do about it, in order to figure out and evaluate it. And we are in an environment in which the image is in the forefront. Okay? Now, you'd like to think computational, that should be math. But remember what happened. I mean, I think in some ways it's telling. Why did we need a graphical user interface? This wasn't that long ago, young people. You know, this was not that long ago. Okay, why did we need a graphical user interface? Well, because people couldn't use the bloody machines if they had the right line code. They had to deal with the math. Generally, people weren't any good at it. It's too hard. They wouldn't do it. It wasn't until we made it look like little pictures. Oh, look, a desktop with folders and a trash can, that people really took to it, until we turned it into this cartoon-like image that really, behind it, is a very mathematically technical set of procedures, but it didn't take off until we replaced that metaphor. That, you know, kind of gives you a sense of how it sort of can be kind of scary. That maybe we deal so much with images in television and new media both, film, everything else that we do now, that we're trying to replace what we did before with stuff that isn't as efficient for what we need it for, which is reasoning and making decisions. I mean, I just don't think there's very much argument. I mean, maybe. I don't think there's a lot of really rational argument that says our political system is better because it's image-oriented. I suppose there are aspects in which more people get a picture of who it is they're voting for, right? But it's hard for me to accept the notion that our political system is better because it's bought and sold by advertising and the way that the candidate looks and acts and talks on television and ads. It doesn't compute as that being a better political system. Okay? We don't have, and we've got 25 pretty solid years of evidence. We don't have any solid indication that your ability to access stuff online is making you better students. We have information that's allowing you to get through school, no doubt. But we don't have any, there still isn't any data in the educational literature that says this is actually making students better. Not much. And there's some indication that it's probably not. That's probably eroding students' general abilities. But we can't isolate the factors altogether yet. And of course, there is this concern finally in this area that these are appealing environments that kind of pull you in, and that maybe there's some risks there. That maybe, we will eventually sort of change our minds about what we find attractive, and that we will be more satisfied with that which is simulated than that which is real, whatever the difference is there. And there are some deep philosophical arguments about the nature of that, going back all the way, of course, to Plato, and even before him, actually, the difference between the real and the simulated. But there is this notion that this stuff is getting to be pretty seductive. You have friends who spend too much time playing games. It may not be you, but you know people who do. They just can't put it down. It's too compelling. And when that one, they get tired of that one, they pick up another one, and that one's too compelling. Or people who can't put Facebook down, or people who can't put the web down, or people who can't stop tweeting. And that, it's taking more and more of our time and our attention. Perhaps to the point that we're sort of changing our values about what's useful and what's not. I mean, well, I want to oversimplify it, but maybe you have younger brothers and sisters. You can't convince them it's better to go out and play. I don't care what you do. You just can't. You cannot convince them that when their friends come over, it's better if they turn off the machines and actually interact with each other than interact with each other while they're on the machines, with the machines. I can tell you how many times I got in my basement, 3 girls huddled around a computer, sort of talking to each other, talking to people online, sort of watching television. Now, I know about women and multitasking, I'm hip, but, there's a different quality to that, even with those people, than when they turn it off and do something else. And the time shift on it is really different. There's more time spent that way now, way more. To the point that, if you say, you guys want to go up, stand up and get out and, go out and do something? No, we're hanging out. But they're not hanging out. What they're doing is whatever it is that's in, whatever's in the box is what they're doing.